Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the final Double Wave Yellows podcast of the season. It's the 2021 Abu Dhabi Grand Prix review. It's going to be extended review. We've got an awful lot to talk about, and as usual, Hodders and Tyson join us. Hodders, a lot to talk about on tonight's podcast.
Yeah, I think we're expected to speak a lot with it being the last race, but we got more than we expected.
Absolutely. So, but before we dive into the Formula One, we also had the season finale of Formula 2. Tyson, take it away.
All right, then. So, before we get to the main event, that was the Formula 1 World Championship, we still have to decide a winner for the Formula 2 Championship, which also hadn't been decided coming into the final round of the season with 3 races remaining. Oscar Piastri came into the weekend with a hefty 51.5-point lead over his Prema teammate Robert Schwartzman, and rival Guan Yu Zhou was trailing by 63.5 points, with 65 points on offer. Mathematically, they were the only drivers who could stop him. But in qualifying, Piastri made his intent clear that he was looking to finish the season in style, securing his 5th pole position in a row in qualifying. Meanwhile, Formula 3 graduate Jack Doohan continued his impressive start to his Formula 2 career by lining up alongside him on the front row. Guan Yu Zhou settled for 3rd, and qualifying 10th and taking reverse pole for sprint race 1 was Johan de Reuveler, which is a spot we've seen him in many times this year. So the Saturday brings us the first sprint race with the new configuration of the Abu Dhabi circuit, promising a lot of overtaking and a lot faster, but it didn't change what we've become accustomed to this year. The first sprint race, a very calm, very reserved affair. Piastri got a great start, gaining 4 places before the first corner, and his teammate Schwartzman also had a great start. The Premas made their way up into positions 3 and 4. They look interested, waiting for a mistake from the 2 leaders, but it just never happens. A really good fight between de Reuveler and Felipe Drugovich for the lead, which raged all race long. Piastri managed to take 3rd on lap 20 after a nice wheel-to-wheel battle with Schwartzman, and that was enough to secure him the F2 championship. So, going into sprint race 2, nobody really had anything to lose. And it's exactly what we've become accustomed to. Just everybody sending it into the corners, elbows out, Piastri included, only points of pride at stake. Roy Nissany makes a move on Piastri, surprises him, turns in, makes contact. He ricochets into Yuri Vips on the other side, taking the latter 2 out and bringing out the safety car. Bad luck for Armstrong, who retired almost instantly at the restart with a mechanical issue, promoting Guan Yu Zhou to the top spot. And Schwartzman was able to take 2nd from Ralph Boschung at the next restart a lap later, and that's how the top 3 ended there. But also a great fight between Dan Ticktum and Felipe Drugovich for 4th on the last 2 laps. Ticktum defended hard to hold up Drugovich to the line. Liam Lawson and Johan de Reuveler finished 6th and 7th respectively, and Jack Doohan, once again impressive, finishing in the points. He definitely could be one to watch next year. And then we had the feature race on the Sunday. Piastri started on pole and capped off the championship-winning season in style with a victory over Guan Yu Zhou, his 4th feature race win in a row. Felipe Drugovich also had an excellent race, starting on the mediums rather than the super softs and making the alternate tyre strategy work to claim 3rd place. Doohan also attempting the alternate strategy from 2nd, but we didn't get to see how it would pan out for him. Just immense pressure put on him by Guan Yu Zhou, and the better tyres forced him into a mistake. He clipped the curb and went spinning into the barriers, putting an end to what had been a great weekend up to then. But real excitement at the end as the crossover period between the tyre strategies hit. Those switching to the super softs, scything their way through the field, which included an incredible fight between the net leaders at the time, Pogačar and Drugovich. Drugovich waited an extra lap, briefly got the overcut, but Pogačar on the warmer tyres was able to make his way through. They were both rapidly catching Robert Schwartzman in 3rd, and then Drugovich with an amazing late send taking away position 4. Their charge was only momentarily halted by a virtual safety car brought up by Liam Lawson, who pulled over with an issue, but as soon as racing resumed, Drugovich and Pogačar made their way past Schwartzman, who really had no answer to them at that point on the warm medium tyres. And that completed the top 5. Fun race to cap off what had been a really good season of Formula 2. So the championship standings at the end, finishing 10th, Ralph Boschung, who had a very up and down season, ended on 59.5 points, but really found his form in the last two races, securing himself 2 podiums and very much the best of the rest of the field. In ninth, a long way further, we had Liam Lawson on 103 points. Great early start, winning the first sprint race of the year. Looked like he'd be someone to be reckoned with, but wasn't quite able to maintain that form. Very consistent races and point-scoring finishes pulled his final total up into the triple digits. Finishing 8th was Felipe Drogovic on 105 points. Tough early start to the season, but he started to really deliver the results in the back half, and those 2 podiums in Abu Dhabi really helped him, pulled him up into 8th. In 7th, we had Jahan Deruvala on 113 points, who always seemed to be out or near the front, fighting for those race wins, especially in the sprints, benefiting from the reverse pole positions. Good season overall, had some really good battles on track. In 6th, we had Yuri Vips with 120 points. Started off really well, strung a few wins together along with some good point finishes and, of course, the brilliant back-to-back victories in Baku, but then just seemed to fall away in the second half of the season after a number of retirements. Finishing 5th, Teo Porcher on 140 points. Again, very consistent season, but a lot of points finishes and a few race wins, but of course just fell victim to that awful accident that we saw in Saudi Arabia. His participation in Abu Dhabi looked uncertain, but it was good to see him there recovered and had a great final feature race to cap off his season. In 4th, finished Dan Tickton with 159.5 points, and he's brash, he's outspoken, he says what's on his mind with no filter, but he is a talented driver, no question about it. Picked up plenty of points, finishes and podiums throughout the year, including 2 wins. Next year, he'll be moving across to Formula E, and I'm genuinely looking forward to seeing how things are going to shake out for him over there. In 3rd place, we have Guan Yu Zhou with 183 points. The 2022 Alfa Romeo Formula 1 driver hit the ground running, leading the championship early and locked in a fierce battle with rival Oscar Piastri the whole way, but then he just started to falter in the middle of the season with a few retirements and a few non-points finishes. He pulled it back near the end, and then a great outing in Abu Dhabi with a race win and a 2nd place, reminding us that it's not really just about the money he's bringing. There is a genuinely talented driver who can get it done on the track. In 2nd place, Robert Schwartzman with 192 points. Slow start, but then after finding his momentum, had an incredibly consistent season as the 2nd Bremer driver, putting up multiple podiums and point-scoring races. Took the 2nd step away from Guan Yu Zhou in the final rounds. His future seems uncertain right now, as he's indicated he won't be racing in Formula 2 next year, which is a shame, as he definitely had the potential to win it all in 2022. But he did finish his year on a high by driving for the Haas team and putting them top of the timesheet of the final day of Abu Dhabi testing. And then the winner, the champion, Oscar Piastri, 252.5 points. And what else is there to say? Just an amazing rookie season. 6 wins, many more podiums, taking him to the top spot, and that makes him the 5th champion of the current F2 era, which puts him in the same category as the likes of Charles Leclerc, George Russell, Nick de Vries, who went on to win Formula E this year, and Mick Schumacher. Great company to be a part of. His win makes 3 championships in a row, 3 years for Formula Renault, Formula 3, Formula 2, and he's now currently the Alpine reserve driver and finished 3rd in the Young Drivers Test at Abu Dhabi. Hopefully, this is his road into Formula 1 in the very near future. Special talent, definitely. In the Teams Championship, Prema finished the year on 444.5 points. Univirtuosi finished 2nd on 288. Carlin finished 3rd with 272.5 points, with Hightech 4th on 223, and ART finished 5th with 190. And then, looking forward to next year, we're going to be having some fierce competition. Teo Porcher seems to be the highest place finisher who'll be staying in Formula 2, but with the likes of Clement Novalog, Victor Martin, Kyle Collin, Dennis Hauger, and Jack Doohan all coming up, we are probably going to have a very exciting season next year, and I can't wait for it.
Great stuff. Thanks, Tyson, and thanks for all your hard work on the F2 support race and the F3 support races this year. It's been some spectacular racing all throughout the season. As I said, we have Guan Yu Zhou coming up into Formula One next year. Tyson, it's a bit of a shame that we're going to have the defending F2 champion not on the Formula One or the Formula Two grid. A bit of a shame that there's no current route in for Piastri.
Yeah, it's just a shame right now that there's no seats available. I think it was inevitable once all the drivers had moved around, but I think for sure he's going to be a hot commodity in 2023.
Yeah, fingers crossed. We certainly do not wish to lose a talent such as Oscar Piastri into the wilderness. Right then, let's move on to the Formula One, the final Formula One race review. And the main headlines: Max Verstappen wins the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix and the championship with a last lap pass on Lewis Hamilton. However, controversy reigns after on the safety car restart procedure, which was featuring in the final few laps. Fantastic finish for Carlos Sainz in third, and also Yuki Tsunoda in fourth. Right, so let's move on to the driver focus. And Hodders, I'm going to come to you first. Your first driver of the pick of three you had was Sergio Perez.
And what a pick I ended up with as well. Sergio Perez qualifying a strong P4, also providing some team cover during the race itself while Max pitted, helping to reduce the deficit between Max and Lewis at the point where he pitted from 17 seconds to something much more manageable. Also gave Max the slightest of toes when it came to qualifying as well. He did retire on the third to last lap under the safety car due to, it seems, oil pressure problems, but he did end up classified as P15.
Yeah, it was a bit of a weird retirement for Sergio, because he seemed to be performing absolutely fine. There's no apparent problems with the cars, and all of a sudden an electrical failure 3 laps from the end. It's the final race. Why are you doing that when potentially there's more points on the line? You don't know what's going to happen with Hamilton and Bottas. For all we know, we could have been talking about the fact that they threw away the World Constructors' Championship.
Absolutely. It did seem rather unusual, and I think the timing didn't really help either. We'll never know, of course, although we might find some stuff out in the fullness of time. It did seem a very unusual late retirement when, I agree with you, everything during the whole weekend seems going absolutely fine.
Yeah, very, very strange. We'll obviously talk more about Perez's season, as we will the other 19 drivers in our season review podcast, which we will release early in January. More on that later. Tyson, to you next, and your first pick out. Again, you had a pretty good selection. Valtteri Bottas.
Yeah, it looked like a pretty good selection, but then he just didn't seem to have it. He just struggled all weekend. An unimpressive qualifying performance during the race. He dropped as low as 8th and just had to settle for 6th in the end. I think the only word to sum it up is disappointing, because it was a crucial race for Mercedes and he was just a total non-factor, nowhere to be seen, when they could have really used him in the same way that Red Bull were able to utilise Perez.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that, again, we could have been talking about, the fact that Mercedes threw away the Constructors' Championship to Red Bull. So, yeah, Bottas has been... It's been odd. When there's races where he's been in the hunt for the win, he's really been up there. But basically, once Hamilton, the 2 Red Bulls are past, he just doesn't seem to want to get involved, which is really, really strange. Hodders, which we thought was a really nice touch to see at the end, was when his mechanics asked him to go engine mode 77 or something, which relates to Valtteri Bottas's car number. And there was a nice message in Finnish for Valtteri, which was a thank you, Valtteri. A nice touch there from Mercedes.
Yeah, it's always nice to have, when you're a Finn, you get the occasional indulgence of the word kiitos, which is the swore me for thank you in there as well, and I think he deserved it thoroughly. I mean, he's had a good run at Mercedes, and to have that sort of thing at the end is a very nice touch.
Absolutely. Right, so moving on to the first of my three, and I didn't really get the luck of the draw on this one. So my first one was the Monegasque Charles Leclerc. Started in P7, managed to get past Bottas on the opening lap, however, just dropped down the field, ending up finishing in P10. He was one of the lap runners towards the end, but we will discuss that a little bit later on. Tyson, a bit of a disappointing finish for Charles.
Yeah, once again, the word disappointing because he's had an extremely consistent season. He's been in fourth place so many times. He was delivering all the results for Ferrari. So, yeah, just not really what you'd expect for the final race, but it doesn't take away from what's been a really good season for him.
Absolutely. And on to the second round of drivers and holders. I think you probably got one of the drivers of the day. Yuki Tsunoda, what a performance.
He's been a podcast favourite and a personal favourite from the start of the season, even the pre-season, just with his potential. And my goodness, he's had some performances in his rookie season, but this one absolutely was the icing and the cherry on top of the qualifying cake and the World Championship cake as well for him. He made his 10th appearance this season in Q3, which for a rookie is not bad going at all, more so than AlphaTauri. He outqualified his teammate Pierre Gasly as a rarity and ended up qualifying in position 8. He generally stuck into the points positions, but once it came to the end of the climax of the race, he really pulled out all the stops and finished a very respectable P4, the highest position of his career so far. He was only half a second away from a podium, it's worth pointing out.
Yeah, what a headline that would have been if
Agreed.
we got Yuki on the podium. And it could well happen next season. I think if AlphaTauri continue to develop as well as they have this season, we will wait and see. Tyson, on to your next choice, and unfortunately a bit unlucky with this one, Nicholas Latifi.
Yes, but as it turns out, there's actually quite a lot to say about Latifi for, reasons. So he had a really good qualifying, only missing getting through to Q2 by a tenth of a second, and once again outqualified his teammate Russell, which is a really good achievement. But then during the race, he spun and crashed while fighting Mick Schumacher for what was effectively last place, and it set future events into motion. It's probably interesting what must be going through his head knowing that that's really what started everything, but I do think he's been unfairly given a hard time because he's a racer. You go on the track, you take every opportunity that's there, whether you're fighting for first or whether it's to not be last. Unfortunately, it just didn't work out for him this time. It could have happened to anybody, but hopefully he's able to put all this out of his mind, not dwell on it, not think that it's his fault, he caused it or anything like that, and just look forward to what 2022 is going to bring.
Yeah, and we'll touch more on that later on. But Hodders, it's always been, Martin Brundle has always said it's not if you crash, it's when you crash. And Latifi, it was just that unfortunate moment for him.
When it happened, and considering the juncture it was, I think it was lap 52, it was just poor luck more than anything else. Nobody's going to be able to predict when they're going to crash. He was making a perfectly legitimate move against Mick Schumacher. He lost control, crashed into the barrier, caused the events that rolled on towards the end of the race. It happens, and I will say, I've read his statement that's on Twitter. I won't repeat any of it, but he's been very level-headed. He's been very calm about it, and he did say he wouldn't want to hasten to think how others would react if they had the same abuse and abhorrent comments fired against them.
Absolutely, and obviously we will cover that a little bit later on as well. It's something we don't like talking about, but unfortunately it has become a talking point for the wrong reasons. On to my second choice, and again, not really a great race for Danny Ricardo. Started in P10 and again just fell down the order. The first driver who was not on the lead lap, finishing P12. Tyson, it's odd to say about Ricardo because when Ricardo's been on it this season, my goodness me, he has been fantastic to watch. But more often than not, it's always been trying to think of what the promise could have been.
Yeah, and that just seems to sum up his entire season. There was obviously the great win in Monza, and it looked like he had really settled in at McLaren at that point, but then it just started to get away from him again.
Absolutely, a bit of a shame there. And on to the final round of selections. And Hodders, you picked out another one of our double-waved yellows favourites, George Russell.
Yes, in his final race for the team that has accommodated him so well the last 3 seasons in the form of Williams. Of course, he is going on to bigger things. I'm not necessarily say better things, because that would be objective, but a bit too subjective. But he's going on to bigger things, and deservedly so. He qualified P17, which, again, when there's not been much development on the Williams car in the second half of the season, is to be expected. But he was only just under a fifth of a second shy of making Q2. He retired on lap 26, the same lap as the Iceman Kimi Raikkonen, due to gearbox problems.
Yeah, a bit.
Got up to about 5th gear and lost it.
Yeah, it's a shame for the way for George to finish his final race for Williams in that way. Tyson, we're looking forward to seeing what George can do in that Mercedes next season.
Absolutely. If this season any indication, he has wrung the neck out of that Williams. He's got it up there in positions it's had no place being, let's be honest. And yeah, I am really looking forward to seeing what he can do in a better car next year.
Absolutely. And staying with you, Tyson, your third choice for the weekend was Carlos Sainz.
Yeah, and Carlos Sainz, once again, very impressive in qualifying. He found pace that just seemed to not be there in practice, and that put him in 5th on the grid. And then the race itself, very impressive. He took 4th place from Lando Norris and then was promoted to the podium after Perez retired. So that not only gave him a 4th podium of the season, but in the process, leapfrogging both his current teammate Charles Leclerc and former teammate Norris to take 5th in the Drivers' Championship. So all credit where it's due. He's had a solid season at Ferrari.
He's had a very good season at Ferrari, and what better way to finish the season than effectively being sort of the best of the rest of the Formula 1.5 championship winner.
Absolutely.
Yeah, superb season he's had. Hodders, it's been very close between both of the Ferrari drivers this season, but would it be fair to say that, you know, with the podiums that he has had this season, that Sainz has come out on top in the Ferrari inter-team battle?
I do think that Carlos has come out by a small margin in terms of the battle of the intra-team battle, so to speak. I do think at the same time, though, that with all credit to Charles, and we'll talk about this in the season review, Charles has had some misfortunes as well that will be covered in the review, but I think Carlos has had the edge this season.
Yep, I think that's not an unreasonable thing to say. And finally, moving on to my third and final choice, actually one that I was glad I got. Pierre Gasly had a bit of a poor qualifying starting in P12, but he certainly made up the positions racing through to finish 0.8 of a second behind his teammate Yuki Tsunoda, finishing in P5. Hodders, I think AlphaTauri are going to have to say that this was their race of the season.
I'm very much inclined to agree. Both drivers scoring, both doing their bit. I mean, combined with Yuki getting that fantastic 4th position, that was a weekend they will want to have on their highlight reel.
Yep, absolutely. And Tyson, just interesting to see, Tsunoda leading home. Gasly, is it getting to the point where has Tsunoda got the edge on Gasly? Are they sort of level pegging?
It's difficult to say right now because Yuki, he started off hot, he finished hot, but Gasly has been the more consistent of the two across the whole season. But yeah, again, next year, looking forward to seeing what the two of them can do.
All right, good stuff. Right, so let's move on to our winners and spinners, and we're just going to look at the race. Obviously, we'll do a winners and spinners in terms of the championship on our season review podcast. For me, I'm going to go first. For me, my winner of the weekend was Max Verstappen, because we had a fantastic battle between him and Lewis, and Max. He won the race and the championship with an absolutely sublime final lap pass. It was a great battle, and I think he deserved to win the race. Great tactics from the team to pit under the virtual safety car to put himself on some fresh rubber, and then a great decision at the end, a great gamble to pit for the softs on the safety car, which paid off handsomely. Tyson, we're going to come to you because you're in agreement as well. He was your winner as well.
Yep, I agree. Max is the winner for me because despite all the controversy, he won it on the track. He made the pass clean, like the crash that everyone was predicting. It didn't happen. And, he didn't win it over just one lap. He put himself in that position over 22 races, over 9 months, and then he just took full advantage of a golden opportunity that presented itself. Very well-deserved World Championship.
Yeah, absolutely. Hodders, what's your thoughts on Verstappen's race performance?
I feel like Max Verstappen and Red Bull couldn't have played anything or raced anything better at all. I'll make it quite clear here that the racing between himself and Lewis Hamilton throughout the whole race, it was good, clean racing. And that's after all of the tension and the red mist that we've had for all the other incidents throughout the season. When it came to the final race, I'm commending them both here, they both did everything right. They raced properly, they raced fair and square. I feel like Max did it right on the night. He did it right over the season. In terms of consistency, we'll cover that more in the review. But I would also say that those 2 pit stops that were taken under virtual safety car and safety car were absolutely perfectly timed. When I was watching back and I saw the soft tyres go on, I thought, this is a brilliant gamble if it pays off, and boy, did it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it made sense for Verstappen to stop for the red marked soft in the final few laps, because obviously he wasn't going to lose track position, and obviously if the race got restarted, which it did, he was always going to have the advantage. Sticking with the Red Bull theme, Hodders, your winner, not a driver but a team, and a very well deserved mention, AlphaTauri.
Originally, I was going to give it to Yuki Tsunoda, but on reflection, it felt it would have been a disservice not to go for the whole team effort. I mean, to begin with Yuki Tsunoda on that side, it was what I thought was a very mature drive from the young Japanese rookie. Top 10 finish from a Q3 performance, actually converted it into one for a change, and it tops off a season where I think 2022 is going to be very, very promising indeed. As for Pierre Gasly, while he didn't get through Q2, which was an unusual thing for him, it was a brilliant recovery to finish with points, and although he finished behind Yuki, I don't think he'll begrudge Yuki's performance at all. Overall, for AlphaTauri, it was a very, very satisfying weekend.
Mm-hmm. And before we move on to the spinners, Hodders, I know you wanted to give an honourable mention, and rightly so, to the Hamilton family following the race.
Yeah, I've got to give it to the Hamilton family because, as was seen on screen, Lewis and his father, Anthony, wonderful man, both went over. They congratulated Max after the race. And I will say that Lewis's remarks after the race in his interview, you could tell he was absolutely somewhat broken. He was magnanimous and he was sporting and very much in the spirit of F1, which is sometimes forgotten about.
Yeah, here, say all of us. We're now going to move on to the spinners, and Tyson, haven't you put in your notes who you're going to go with? Am I assuming you're going to go with what myself and Hodders have put?
I am in a way, but I do have some.
Okay, well, let's hear your spinner then. Okay.
Right. I said some nervousness because there are no notes here. But I think given everything that's happened, everything that's been said, it would be unfair to blame one specific person for what's happened. My spinner is Formula One as a sport. Now, don't get me wrong, this whole season, it's been dramatic. It's been great television, and I've loved watching it and following it. And the last lap of Abu Dhabi, much like 2008, that is a moment that's going to be replayed for years to come. But this has all happened amongst a backdrop of rules that have been applied inconsistently throughout the year. Punishments and penalties that seem to be given out when it's convenient, not going to get in the way of a championship battle. And what happened on the final lap, absolutely unfair from a sporting sense. The rule book just being shredded right in front of us for the sake of a dramatic ending to what honestly was a bit of a dull race up to then, just to make sure it delivered on the hype that had been built up for weeks and delivered the explosive ending that had been promised.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting that one. I'll give you that. And you know what? I think actually, to be fair, Tyson, I think you have got a point because we have seen inconsistencies in regards to decisions from race control. I mean, we'll talk about that a bit more, and also decisions from the stewards. Now, there has been a lot of talk about trying to have a permanent steward for every race, which I guess would ensure more consistency in the rules, but equally then you could argue then that the rules are implied inconsistently by the same person. It's a very, very tricky one. And obviously we'll talk about that in a lot more detail in our talking points shortly, but I certainly think that is something that has put a dampener not just on this race and the championship battle, but on a lot of other races. I was watching back through the race highlights from all of this year's races earlier today, and it's so noticeable actually when you watch, well, that was penalised, but that wasn't, and that was given a 5-second penalty, and that was given a 10-second penalty. So it's very, very hard to have consistency when they are decisions in regards to in regards to a driving offence, such as forcing a driver wide or what have you, or causing a collision. They are ones where there's going to be degrees of severity. So it's how do you judge those certain things? I don't know. But yeah, it's a fair point, and obviously we'll talk about that more both later tonight and indeed on the season review. Hodders, your thoughts?
I wasn't expecting it either, but I find myself concurring with Tyson on that one. I think the point he's made about the rules not being applied consistently throughout the season, not just this race, is with complete basis. We've had occasions where we've had two incidents of the same nature in the same race by different drivers dealt with differently, or where a driver, I'm not naming names, has committed the same offence in the same race and received the same penalty each time rather than some sort of escalation of that for a repeat offence. That is something that does need to be very carefully looked into. And I agree with Tyson that the reception and the perception even of the sport has been diminished by decisions made this season.
Yeah, indeed. But before we turn this into a officials bashing podcast, which you are absolutely not going to do, and that's one of the things that we on Double Wave Yellows pride ourselves. We're not going to do a bashing of the stewards. We're definitely not doing a bashing of Michael Massey. Certainly not on this podcast, because and we'll talk about that more. But I think what, as unpleasant as that has been, or as uncomfortable as that has been, even more so. What has been the conduct of who our spinners are, mine Hodders spinners are for this weekend, and that is the conduct of the fans. And we thought the previous race at Saudi Arabia was bad. What happened at Abu Dhabi was appalling in terms of fans in the stand booing. We don't do that in motorsport. That just doesn't happen. But also on social media, and again, we will cover that in a lot more detail. But I'll come to you to obviously add to this. But the conduct of Formula One fans as a whole on that weekend, it was very unpleasant for those who care a lot about our sport.
It really was, and I will admit, I think the last time I was watching Formula One regularly before this season was, I think it was before Twitter even existed, which shows how long ago it was. But at the same time, it's just within, what amazed me was how bad it was within minutes of the race, and in fact, while the race was happening as well. I wasn't actively searching things out, but some of the things that were there, which I did block and report, were just, they were shocking, they were abhorrent, and they were just thoroughly unpleasant and toxic.
Yeah.
And there's no need for that. I mean, let's face it, and I'm not saying this to get on topic, let's face it, social media is enough of a bit of a cesspool, toxic cesspool at times, at the best of times, but at the worst of times, it's even worse.
Yeah, absolutely. And Tyson, what was worse is that some of it's actually who some of these social media comments were coming from. Some of them were coming from people who just happened to tune in for that race, who have no idea how the sport works. And at the other end, you've got some coming from people who are high-profile people associated with the sport, who are giving the officials and the sport an absolute slamming. There's no place for that.
Yeah, there's just no call for it at all. That's just the way things are on social media these days. People think they can say what they want about who they want, and there's no consequence for it. And it's just a shame, but that's a whole different rant altogether.
Yeah, and we're not going to go on to that, because again, that's something that we've been very deeply upset to see. And if you are one of those people that has been posting unpleasant content in the last couple of weeks, then we ask that you actually think about what you've posted and perhaps consider hitting the delete button. Anyway, we're going to move on to the talking points, and again, we've got in the brackets on our notes no more than 15 minutes. I think we can get this done in 30 minutes. We'll be doing well. So, as usual, Max versus Lewis, round 22, the final round. And I think it's very fair to say that we were treated to a superb race-long battle as early as turn 5. Lewis pushed slightly wide by Max. Lewis had to run across the escape road. Max obviously asking for the position to be given back. The stewards getting involved on this one straight away and saying no investigation necessary. Hodders, fair decision?
Now, I admit I had to look at it back as well, because admittedly I actually heard all the discussion about this initially as I was driving back from a basketball game, and I was listening on radio, and they talked about it for a good 4 or 5 laps. They thought that there was an investigation of some sort, and they were surprised. And we're talking those who know what they're talking about on BBC 5 Live, other radio stations are available. I feel like at the time, it was done the right way, in that there was no investigation. It was 6 of one and half dozen the other in parts as well, and at least a swift decision was made that didn't impact the race later on. So I think it was a fair decision at that point and the correct one.
Okay, and Tyson?
Yeah, I'm in agreement with that. I thought it was a racing incident at the time. It's very similar to other incidents we've seen, and yeah, I think it was just handled the best way it could have been at that point in time.
Yeah, and I think it's fair to say this wasn't a decision made because it was going to affect the championship. I think if that had been a decision involving drivers right down the back, I think they would have had come to the same conclusion, in that, you know, the driver was forced off the track by another driver, but you know, the driver's forced off. They've given a little bit of time back to ensure that they don't gain the time advantage. I think that was fair. Tyson, Max Verstappen, a worthy championship winner?
Absolutely. He deserves the championship, and it's just a great shame that his maiden win has been tainted in this way, but yeah, absolutely deserved to win. Both of them did, for the show that they put on all year long. It's, like I said earlier, been the best season in a long, long time. The most dramatic final lap since 2008, and it has just been a pleasure as a fan to watch them do battle all year long.
Yeah, and going all the way back to when we did the season preview podcast, all the way back in March. If you'd said to us that after 22 rounds going into the final race that they would be absolute dead level on points, you said, "Here, have my money straight away." But absolutely, we'll take that. The one key factor for me, though, Hodders, should Lewis have pitted on the virtual safety car around lap 35?
It does make you wonder, doesn't it? Because you would think that had he gone for that tyre change, he may well have increased that advantage prior to what transpired later on, and it may well have worked because he did find himself saying at some point in the race, maybe before that VSC, I think he was saying it's going to be a bit of an ask working this long on these tyres. So it does make you wonder what if. Hindsight is a wonderful thing.
Yeah,
I think in the scheme of things, it could have made a small difference. You never know, but it could have done.
Well, I mean, I'm just looking at the data from Pirelli here. So Verstappen, pitted lap 36 during VSC to go on to another set of brand new hard tyres. Lewis pitted on lap 14 for a set of used hard tyres. So it's not unreasonable to think that could have made a difference. Okay, Lewis still would have been on hard tyres after the safety car, but he may have had a better shot at it. We will never know. Right, now we're going to talk about the decision and the incident that has got a lot of people talking, rightly or wrongly. So what we are going to do, we are going to try and present this as objectively as possible. Okay, and as we said, we are not doing a Michael Massey bashing session because he's taken a lot of it so far in the last couple of weeks, and he has not had an opportunity to come out and explain what has happened. And also from what we can see, yes, things have gone wrong, but I think there's rationale as to why. So, lap 53, Nick Latifi crashes in the final sector. It's a very heavy crash into the barriers. Quite clearly, a recovery truck needs to come onto the circuit. So Michael Massey, the race director, makes the decision to deploy the safety car. Hodders, no choice on this one. It can't be covered under either double yellow flags or the virtual safety car.
No, absolutely not. When you consider, first off, that you need to get a recovery vehicle onto the circuit, which would require some sort of safety car, virtual or otherwise, and the fact that it was also the positioning of where Nicholas Latifi's car was. It was in a position where it just was not safe for marshals lights to be on the track, even with VSC. Therefore, there was no option but to deploy the safety car, and deployed swiftly it was.
Mm-hmm. But equally, Tyson, this is something that's being talked about. Why wasn't the race red flag? Why wasn't it suspended to allow the race have a chance of finishing under green? And I will just quote here, Article 50.1 of the sporting regulations. If competitors or officials are placed in immediate physical danger by cars running on the track and the clerk of the course deems circumstances are such that the track cannot be negotiated safely, even behind the safety car, the race will be suspended. Tyson, quite clearly, the race was able to continue behind the safety car safely.
Yeah, and the safety car was the right option at that moment in time. There was no immediate reason for a red flag.
Yeah, absolutely. So now we get on to the key bit. So for those not aware, this is a 58-lap race, increased by 3 laps because of the track changes. So lap 56 of 58, the message is displayed on the timing screens. Lapped cars will not overtake, and I will refer to the safety car regulations in here. So Article 48.12, the last paragraph. If the clerk of the course considers track conditions are unsuitable for overtaking, the message "overtaking will not be permitted" will be sent to all competitors via the official messaging system. Now, at this point, we're thinking, and Holly, we'll come to you first, we're thinking either the race is going to finish behind the safety car, or we are going to basically get like a one lap sprint finish with basically Hamilton in front and then Verstappen stuck behind 5 lapped cars.
Now, speaking as a relative layman at the time, when I saw that, I thought, right, it's going to be all for Max to overtake the cars that are there in the one lap, and that's that. And I thought, if that's the case and that's how Lewis wins, so be it. At that point, I had no reason to question that decision.
No, and Tyson, it could also be that they were just thinking, I say, either a one lap finish or finish behind the safety car, because quite clearly, Michael Massey may well have been thinking at this point, because we've still got the marshals and the recovery truck on the track, there won't be time to complete the restart procedure, which we'll go into shortly.
Yeah, that's what it was increasingly looking like at that point in time.
Mm-hmm. But then, first of the key bits, lap 57, lapped cars may overtake. So again, we refer back to Article 48.12, the first paragraph. If the clerk of the course considered it safe to do so, and the message lapped cars may now overtake has been sent to all competitors via the official messaging system, any cars that have been lapped by the leader will be required to pass the cars on the lead lap and the safety car. Now, this is where the contention starts to arise, because the rule is actually very clear here. It says this will only apply to cars that were lapped at the time they crossed the start-finish line, the end of the lap during which they crossed the safety car line for the second time after the safety car was deployed. Now, I think there are about 8 cars who were lapped. However, the message was very, very clear in that it was only the 5 cars between Lewis and Max that were allowed to overtake. Tyson, this seemed odd. It was understandable you're letting those 5 cars through, but why not the other guys at the back?
Yeah, it was just weird watching it play out, and it just seemed very problematic, because if you're going to let some of the cars through, surely you have to let all of them through at this point.
Yeah.
But of course, if you do that, there's not going to be time left to have a one-lap shootout.
Yep, exactly, because 48.12, again, it says, having overtaken the cars on the lead lap and the safety car, these cars should then proceed around the track at an appropriate speed without overtaking, and make every effort to take up position at the back of the line of cars behind the safety car. Whilst they are overtaking, and in order to ensure this may be carried out safely, the cars on the lead lap must always stay on the racing line unless deviating from it is unavoidable. Here's the key bit. Unless the clerk of the course considers the presence of the safety car is still necessary, once the last lapped car has passed the leader, the safety car will return to the pits at the end of the following lap. Now, assuming that that's played out correctly, that means the safety car is coming in at the end of lap 58. That's the final lap, which means basically it's just a processional finish, which doesn't look right. The next bit then caused a lot of consternation, because we then saw that message, safety car in this lap. And that seemed to contradict what 48.12 says, as we've just read out. And again, I'll read this. When the clerk of the course decides it is safe to call in the safety car, the message safety car in this lap will be sent to all competitors via the official messaging system, and the car's orange lights will be extinguished. This will be the signal to the competitors and drivers that it will be entering the pit lane at the end of that lap. So, and this is something that was discussed by the stewards as part of the post-race appeal issued by Mercedes. Once that message comes up on the timing screen, unless there's a specific reason why, the safety car is coming in that lap. And that seems, Tyson, to contradict what the rules say.
Yeah, and that's definitely where the contention comes from. And Mercedes and Toto Wolff, they had every right to be angry afterwards, because they were following what was written down black and white, what they assumed were going to happen. But all of a sudden, you've got this that's just happened, the 5 lapped cars allowed to pass. It seems like they just made it up on the spot so that they could engineer this final lap for the maximum amount of drama.
Yeah. Now, one thing that was also mentioned as part of the investigation, Article 15.3E of the sporting regulation, and it says, and again I'm quoting here, the clerk of the course shall work in permanent consultation with the race director. The race director shall have overriding authority in the following matters, and the clerk of the course may give orders in respect of them only with his express agreement. Section E is the use of the safety car. Now, as we understand it, if the clerk of the course says, no, there is no need for a safety car, and the race director says, yes, there is a need for a safety car, the race director's opinion trumps the clerk of the course, because the race director is in charge of the whole event. However, again, as we understand it, that doesn't mean he can go beyond what it says in the sporting regulations. So that is where the contention clearly is. Now, one thing we didn't approve of from Michael Massey is the team radio communication between Toto Wolff, in charge of Mercedes, and Mr. Massey, and that basically Toto was saying you need to reinstate the previous lap, because understandably why, and Michael Massey's comments of, Toto, that was a motor race, we went car racing. Now, for me, that draws similar comparisons when you have sports officials in other sports, and I'm not going to name any sports in particular, where they said, it's my decision, it's the right one, I'm not talking about it. I think what should have happened in that instance is perhaps Michael Massey could have said something along the lines of, look, okay, we know you're not happy, come and talk to us half an hour after the race and we'll explain what happened. It just means, yes, we're prepared to explain things, but we need everyone to calm down and take a breath and just get all our information together. I think that was one thing that I think could have been handled better. Tyson, do you think that's fair?
Yeah, I do think it's fair, and it's something we've, especially over this season, we've seen it increasingly happen, just how open the chatter is now over the radios that we, as the viewers, get to see. Again, they want this to be as much of the show as possible, just drama, and yeah, I think that's what Michael Massey may have been going for with that, but I do think the comments themselves just a little bit out of line.
Yeah, and I think it's been great to hear that the radio conversations between the teams and between race control. I think it's an added degree of transparency which we really have been treated to this year, but I think it's fair to say on this occasion it has backfired massively.
Yeah, I mean, when we got the audio this season, I think we all agreed at the time, it was quite refreshing to hear that communication, the interest of transparency and showing sort of the more inner machinations of a race. Although at the same time, I do think there does need to be some sort of measured limitation of what we do here, because there is a limit to what is acceptable to be heard and what isn't. I mean, comments like that, I think it's just a case of those on the audio remembering who's hearing it as well.
Yeah, exactly. And lastly, although he went about it in the wrong way, I think we all agree with Michael Massey's reasoning, and that everyone wants to see, where possible, the race finish under green flag conditions. No one wants to see the race ended early because of a red flag. No one wants to see the cars led across the start-finish line by the safety car. We want a green flag finish. So I think that's perfectly fair. It's just, unfortunately, on this occasion, Hodders, it did go wrong.
Exactly. It didn't go as planned, and I agree with the sentiment that I think every fan of racing wants a car race or motor race to finish under full green track clear conditions where they're free to race, rather than a certain other Grand Prix that I won't mention at this moment in time. Although on this occasion, had it ended on the safety car, per the rules and everything else, it wouldn't have been the ideal situation for everybody. I know, but I feel that there would at the same time have been a begrudging appreciation had that happened, that it had been done in line with what was written down in the regulations.
Yeah, I mean, I know that NASCAR has this green-white checkered procedure,
Yes, they do.
in that obviously if there is a pace car, full course caution, however you want to call it, in the final few laps, even if it means the last of the scheduled lap is under yellow, what then happens is you basically have a 2-lap sprint finish effectively. So the first flag is, the green flag is thrown. If there is a crash on that lap, then you go, you basically reset and you go again. And then once the white flag is thrown, that is it. That is the final lap. If there is a reason to put the safety car back out or the pace car back out again, then that's it. I think the problem is, obviously, with refueling not permitted in F1, you just couldn't do that. No. The last thing we want to say, and I think this is the very important thing that we need to say and to make very, very clear. Michael Massey has got the hardest job in motorsport, and that's without all the shenanigans that have happened this season. He is responsible for the safety of the drivers, of the teams, of the fans, of the marshals, and everyone. And he has got it all to. He's got a very clear set of regulations. He is under pressure from all sides to make sure it's all done properly and fairly in the best spirit of racing as possible. Michael got an absolute slating for what happened at Spa. We discussed it on here on our VSC podcast. We felt it was he was damned whatever was going to happen there. I just hope that Michael Massey doesn't make the decision himself to walk away from the sport, because we need people of his experience. And I just hope that everyone within Formula One is able to step back, take a look how they behaved, and just make sure that when we go back for the new season, go back for winter testing, is that we actually appreciate more the people like Michael Massey and the other officials and volunteers in the sports who help make motorsport happen. Fair, Hodders?
I completely agree with that. I would sooner we come back to winter testing where everything is resolved. We get rid of the knots, the loopholes, the ambiguities, the uncertainties. We cover all the what ifs. That way, we can have regulations for next year where nothing is in doubt, or almost nothing is in doubt, and you've got some sort of reference, even if there is the rare occasion where something has to come into play.
Mm-hmm. Tyson?
Yeah, I think it's unfortunate that he is the most public figure out of all of this, and everybody's going to want to see somebody take a fall for this, and unfortunately it probably is going to be him.
Yeah, we hope not, because he is he's taken a lot of rap, and again, it's a very tough job, and we joked, I think, at the end of the last podcast, this is one, on this one race, no one would have wanted to have that, because that was going to be, whatever was going to happen, that was going to be the hardest job to direct that race. We're going to come. This isn't a Michael Massey fan show, I will say. We've got some more points to raise about Mr. Massey and the FIA shortly, but I think we're going to talk about some of the other bits. So we touched on it earlier. The stuff on social media that has been aimed in particular at Nick Latifi over the last couple of weeks. We've only just been made aware of it this week. But the fact that Nicholas Latifi has been receiving hate and abuse and death threats to a point on social media as well. Hodders, there is a line that must not be crossed, and that has clearly been crossed on far too many occasions.
It's not, how I was going to say, in some countries, at least particularly in the UK, it's not just abhorrent, it's also illegal, more than anything else. So there are fans who are potentially breaking laws by doing that. In the case of think before you type.
Yeah, I mean, Tyson, the drivers and the teams interact so well with their fans on social media, and the majority of the stuff is absolutely fantastic. But when this sort of stuff happens, the drivers probably do question why are they doing it.
Yeah, and it is very recent thing under Bernie. This, all this interaction on social media, he would have never allowed that to happen. So it is really good that they're able to do that now. And yeah, just the abuse, the hate, there's just no call for it.
No, absolutely not. And it's not just Nick Latifi. It's been a lot of drivers over the course of not just season, but this season going back. There is just absolutely no need for it. And again, if you are one of those people who has been a bit of a keyboard warrior, there's no excuse for it. Think carefully what you type. Would you say that to their faces? Probably not. Would you want your employers seeing that sort of content? Probably not. Just think very, very carefully before you do hit that send button. Think who you could be affecting. You could be affecting their family and their friends as well. So just be careful what you put out there. We also touched on it a little bit earlier on. We had some changes to the Yas Island circuit to make it a little bit faster, and also some banked turns as well. Tyson, what were your thoughts on it, seeing what we did?
I think the intent was there, but we never really saw it on the track because those massive gaps were still there. There's just not a whole lot of racing on Abu Dhabi, to be honest.
No, true. I mean, one thing is probably worth mentioning is had that chicane been in place, on the approach to the hairpin, and this is one of those what ifs. You've got to argue if that chicane had been there, would Verstappen have been able to pass Hamilton on the final lap?
It's a good question, and of course, because the layout was changed, the number of laps was changed as well. So any number of things could have happened.
A very valid point.
Oh, we're so sceptical, aren't we? We've made a bit of reference to it. The audio between the teams and race control. It's been mentioned this week. Hodders, do we need to change who has access to that channel in terms of who actually speaks directly to race control? I think there's been some suggestions that it should be just the team manager from each team and not 3 or 4 people.
I don't think that unreasonable. I think it's almost one of those cases where you have a nominated individual who does the speaking rather than several different people at once. It also ensures that you've got no ambiguity as to what people are saying. On top of that, it just ensures a bit more civility at the same time.
Yeah. And Tyson, I guess there's also a degree of responsibility. I guess it's like, it's in rugby, only the captain speaks to the referee. It means that person who is speaking to race control, they are representing the team. Same as when they go to the stewards after the race, they have responsibility to represent the team in the appropriate manner.
Yeah, and there have been sometimes this season where that just hasn't been the case. We've seen, multiple occasions, team principals getting on the radio to Massey trying to almost tell him how to do his job. And yeah, I think it just needs to be reined in a little bit because, don't get me wrong, it's good for the show to see this happening, but as a sport, it's a little bit embarrassing when team principals and the race director are publicly trading handbags with one another over the radio.
Yeah, and that's a good point mentioned there because, yes, we like to hear that conversation, but when it's in regards to decisions of the race director, safety cars, red flags, then now needs, Mr. Massey is responsible for the safety. That comes top. He's responsible for the safety of the organizer. So the only person who should be making decisions is him, and obviously, taking advice from staff. He should not be. The teams should not be lobbying or even bullying him into a decision, Hodders.
Absolutely not. He is the race director. His decision is final. I think some have forgotten that he's the race director. He is the one who, when it comes to makes decisions, he swings the sword. He has, if for want of a better term to almost analogized from Lord of the Flies. He's the one who holds the conch shell, and there's only one person from each team holding the conch shell. When they're holding it, they have the authority.
And I guess to sort of refer back to Spa, Michael Massey had to make the safe decision not to start the race. If he'd have started that race and we'd have had 5 cars piling off and someone injured, he's the one who is responsible. He could have said, "Oh, the teams were all said they were happy to race." No, Mr. Massey, we as the FIA entrust you with the safe running of the event, and you failed on that. So, that needs to. I mean, obviously the teams. If it's something like absolutely torrential rain and you've got all the teams radioing saying we think it's unsafe, that's fair enough. But lobbying the race director to keep the safety car out just because it benefits them, or bring the safety car in because it benefits them, that's an absolute no-no. And that's got to stop. Lastly, before we do come back to some of the supports that I think the FIA needs to be offering, some of the news that's come up this week, the refunds, in inverted commas, for the spectators at this year's Belgian Grand Prix, being offered F1 TV passes and raffle tickets. Hodders, to call it a joke is being very, very polite by us.
Yes, and being a family-oriented podcast, we won't say what we really think it is, we've not been that bad really. But I think our point is clear. That's not a refund. To me, a refund is where you get a full cash equivalent or the following race. But if you can't make the following race a refund, it works just as well in other sports. F1 should do exactly the same.
I mean, Tyson, I guess the promoters would argue, well, hang on, according to the F1 regulations, we had a race, in inverted commas, but in terms of the spirit of things, that's just not right.
Yeah, it's a shame for the fans who did turn out that weekend, because they went there expecting a race. They got a quote-unquote race, and yeah, I think they should be compensated in some way for that.
Yeah, absolutely. We agree, and I think that the organisers and the promoters need to rethink that, because that's not holding them, the circuit, or indeed the sport in the greater regard. Right, last bit of the talking points. I know we have rambled for quite a bit on this, and it comes back to a point that was eloquently made by Sky Sports F1 commentator David Croft, and that is, does the FIA need to give Michael Massey more support? And I say this because this was a fantastic fact provided by Crofty, in that 60% of the FIA's income comes from Formula One. Now, at the moment, the way race control works, it's just Michael Massey on his own. He has got no deputy race director or assistant race director to work off of. Now, previously, when it was the late great Charlie Whiting in charge, he had Herbie Blash with him, and those two worked as a team. I'm sure that any big decisions that need to be made, Charlie and Herbie would discuss things, make sure it was being done properly before the teams were communicated with. So, Tyson, I think it's fair to say that, without meaning this to be disrespectful to Michael Massey, he needs some help.
Yeah, it is a lot for one person to take responsibility on, and we haven't really gone in too hard on him, but he did make a bad call. That's my opinion on the matter, and I think if he did have other people to consult with at the time, maybe another route may have been taken. Maybe the same thing will have happened. We'll never know, but it is a lot for one person to do.
Yeah, and Mr. Massey's title among Formula One race director, I think it's head of FIA single-seater racing. So if you think that's F1, F2, F3, it's all the track inspections, it's all of the other bits and pieces. It's not just what he does at the track. It's a lot of responsibility on Mr. Massey. And another thing we should remember, Michael Massey, he's been in the job 3 seasons. Okay, 2 of those, he's had to lead Formula One through COVID-19. Now, there was absolutely no playbook for that. He has had to work in conjunction with all sorts of authorities and come up with a plan to ensure that Formula One can happen. And give Michael Massey his dues. We have had, 2 fantastic championships where we've had 1 or 2 drivers having to test positive. They've made sure all the protocols were observed. We've been fortunate that and we should be thanking Michael Massey that we've had the last 2 championships. But I think it's fair to say some F1 fans, Hodders, have very short memories.
They do have very short memories, and I think, going back to the point about support, I think the old adage that the safety in numbers rings true in this case. Not just for the drivers, but also for Michael Massey's own well-being.
Yeah, absolutely. And you speak of well-being and welfare. Hopefully, Mr. Massey, if you are listening, we hope you are okay, and your family and friends are okay, because this can't have been easy on them as well. And for me, I think the nuclear option would be to replace Michael Massey. I think they should keep him in post, but they need to obviously have a serious review of what has happened, not just at Abu Dhabi, but this season. See, how can we learn from this? Okay, yes,
exactly.
We admit mistakes happened across the season. What can we do, not just in terms of what the sporting regulations say, but in terms of the processes to make sure it doesn't happen again, so we can just make sure that everyone is talking about the racing on the track. If we're talking in any sport, if we're talking about the officials, either they've done something absolutely superbly fantastic, or something even microscopically has gone wrong. Unfortunately, it's usually the latter. Anyway, we're going to move on from this now. We're going to move into our final thoughts. Hodders, what a title battle we have had.
Yeah, it's been one of the best we've had in years, and what a title race for me to come back to Formula One for, Ray.
I know, we've got you roped into that at just the right time.
Yeah, I'd like to point out I've already signed the contract for 2022.
Yep, just got it through here on the old PDF. Thanks very much for that. We've doubled your wages, by the way. I hope you're double nothing is still nothing.
Double up 0 is still 0.
Hey.
And Tyson, we say some goodbye to old friends. We say bois for the final time to Kimi Räikkönen, and he has given us some great memories.
Absolutely. Kimi is very much going to be missed. What a great character he's been in Formula One over the years.
Yeah, he's been absolutely fantastic. He can hold his head high. He is one of only 34 people to have become a Formula One world champion. I came across a fantastic little factoid earlier this week in the 2005 series, where he just missed out to Fernando Alonso. He was never overtaken, apart from the first lap in the race. He was never overtaken, which is a sensational fact.
Wow!
I know, incredible. Wow. We say farewell to, hopefully temporarily, we'd like to see him back. We say farewell to Antonio Giovinazzi. Hodders, he's had a few good seasons with Sauber and Alfa Romeo, but unfortunately it just appears that something big has never just really materialised for him.
Yeah, it's rather unfortunate in that that's happened to him, but I think Formula E's gain is Formula One's loss, or vice versa. And you never know, he could well be back.
Mm-hmm, we hope so. And of course, there has been driver changes. Of course, Bottas's final race at Mercedes. Tyson, it is very fair to point out, Bottas has contributed massively to the team since coming in 2017. He has helped that team win 5 of its 8 consecutive Constructors' Championships.
Absolutely, it's a team sport, and one driver is not going to win a Constructors' Championship for a team. You need to have that second player, and that's what Bottas has been for the past 5 years. It's probably not the end to his Mercedes career that he would have wanted, and it's summed up what's been a really tough season for him this year, but next year's a fresh start for him. I've always thought he's a solid mid-tier driver, and hopefully he's able to regain some of the form we saw from him when he was at the Williams seat all those years ago, now that the pressure of driving for a top team's off his shoulders.
Yeah, that's a very valid point, and that the pressure will be off of Bottas, but it will now be firmly on George Russell, who had his final race with Williams. Hodders, I am so excited to see what Russell will be like up against Lewis Hamilton, equal cars, and Mercedes have made it clear there's no number one, number two driver. They are free to race.
And that is exactly what we wanted to see. It's going to be very, very interesting with that happening. You've got George and Lewis as equals, and boy, are they going to have some good racing.
Absolutely. Great stuff. Right, so before we wrap things up, just a few things that we have got coming up. On Boxing Day, on the 26th of December, I'm hosting a Formula One quiz. Please come and join on. It's on twitch.tv/Matt_the_ref. There'll be more about it on the our Twitter channel, D-Waved Yellows. Don't forget to go and give us a follow over there. Don't forget to like and subscribe and comment on this video. We want to hear what you think about things. We want to hear your comments. We will also be doing, as mentioned, a feature-length season review in January, going back across all of what's happened across this record-breaking 22 race season. We'll also be having a look, of course, at Formula 2, Formula 3 and the W Series. And actually that does follow on. We've seen the news this week that 3 of the W Series drivers have all tested positive for COVID. Ladies, from all of us here at Double Wave Yellows, get well soon. We hope you're keeping as safe as possible, and we hope it doesn't ruin your festive your festive holidays none too much. Right then, that is it. That is the 2021 season. Hodders, Tyson, thank you so much for your contributions this season. It has been truly epic.
It really has, yeah. I'm just going to leave this as a final thought. A smart businessman once said, controversy creates cash. And despite all the controversy and all the upset we've had, Formula One, it got its dramatic ending to the season. It's got more mainstream attention than it's had in years. Netflix, no doubt, are going to have a ton of new viewers to Drive to Survive to see what all the fuss was about. Max Verstappen, the new world champion, and a new era begins next year. I am so much looking forward to it.
Absolutely. And Hodders?
As I said before, this is the first Formula One season I've watched properly in 13 to 15 years. Back then, there was no DRS, there was no hybrid. Lewis Hamilton even started at that point either, it's worth pointing out. And boy, what a season I came back to, and I'm so glad that I did, and I wouldn't have missed it for the world. And it's also thanks to Matt for having me as well.
Always a pleasure to have you guys chatting on the podcast. And last of all, but the most important people we need to say thank you to are for you guys and girls for coming and listening to our podcasts. We hope you like it. Leave us a comment. Let us know what you think, either in the videos or on our Twitter account. We've seen there's a fair few of you following us now, which is absolutely fantastic. If you're not following us already, it's D-Waved Yellows. We put up at Double Wave Yellows, but not enough characters or too many characters. We usually sign off with our be good, be safe. But I think given what's happened with social media over the last few weeks, I think it's fair to say be good, be safe, and be kind. We hope you all have a fantastic festive break and a new year. We will see you in 2022, and we're just going to leave you with the image of Max Verstappen, the 2021 Formula One Drivers' World Champion. From all of us here at Double Wave Yellows, goodbye.